Supplemental draft is back for the first time since 2019. It's going to kick off July 11th, according to Dane Brugler of The Athletic. And there's only one player so far that has been accepted into this draft pool, and that is Purdue wide receiver Milton Wright. The question is, does he make sense for the Rams or any team going into this draft? In order to get into that, you have to first know what a supplemental draft is. And if you don't know, I'll tell you. Basically, a supplemental draft happens when a player, for whatever reason, can't be a part of the NFL draft. And he's also sometimes, not always, but sometimes ruled ineligible in the college football season. Now, for Milton Wright, the thing here that is important to realize is that Wright was academically ineligible for the 2022 season. Now, because of that, after a 2021 outburst where he had 732 yards on 50 receptions and 7 touchdowns, because of that, he missed out on an entire season. We know that. Purdue missed out on a great receiver, but now he's eligible to potentially be picked in this draft. And it's incredibly interesting because the NFL draft already happened. This is an extension of that, essentially. So Milton Wright had decided, based on his opportunities and the different decisions he would choose to make, he had to decide whether or not he was going to transfer, and he was in the transfer portal, or he was going to go into the USFL, XFL, or he was going to go in the NFL Supplemental Draft, which has been on hiatus since 2019. Now, there have been some good players selected in the Supplemental Draft, but what we often notice is that the Supplemental Draft is a time during the dead period of the NFL offseason where it's a time where, me and other people tend to overhype it. And I'll admit, I've done that before. Sam Beal is a great example of that. A cornerback that was drafted by the Giants with a day 2 pick, and it didn't work out. But anyway, what is the supplemental draft? The supplemental draft is an opportunity for those guys to go into the draft, get selected by a team, get drafted by a team, and get into the NFL without having to try out. And if you're a better player than given credit for, the supplemental draft makes sense. Josh Gordon was a supplemental draft pick in years past. So Jalen Thompson is another great example out of Washington State, who was drafted 5th round supplemental by the Arizona Cardinals, ends up becoming a starter for them. So what do I mean by 5th round, all of that? Well, I'll tell you. If you draft a player in the supplemental draft, you pretty much can draft anybody. And it's only going to be bids, essentially. So there's a certain, listing based on where everybody is for tiebreaker concerns. But for the most part, they are going to have a chance, any team, to bid on a player. And what I mean by that is if a team wants to draft a guy, say, in the 3rd round, they would draft a guy in the 3rd round. They would use their 3rd round pick next year. Obviously, the NFL draft already happened, so it's an opportunity if you have a really good talent and maybe you didn't like the way the NFL draft went, or you just want more talent, you're giving up next year's 2024 pick to draft a guy in 2023. Now, there are pros and cons to this. The pro is that you're getting a talent. You're getting a guy who could have gone higher in the NFL draft and was either not eligible or didn't think to go into the draft until it was all said and done. The other thing is a con. And the con could be you're getting a player who you might have to cut. You might be wasting a draft pick next year for a player you have to cut. So when I look at Milton Wright, he stands at 6'2", 195, out of Purdue. He was expected to have a great 2022 season before being ruled ineligible. Though when I look at somebody like him, I see a 5th rounder. We've seen guys in the past go in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, whatever. I see a 5th. I think you might be able to get him for a 6th, but I see a 5th. Now, mind you, the supplemental draft hasn't happened since 2019. So because of this hiatus, 2 things can happen. 1, we could see teams overreact to it since it's been gone for a little bit, have a lot of interest in Milton Wright. Or number 2, teams not really feel great about going after a guy like that because, well, we've been fine. The supplemental draft hasn't happened since 2019. We're not going to do anything that we'll regret later on. It's a little bit of a gamble, so we'll just let it happen. And if he becomes a free agent, then we'll go after him. Teams will think like that. His first 2 years, he had less than 600 yards. He had 3 touchdowns. And in his junior year, he had 732 yards, 7 touchdowns, and 50 receptions, like I previously mentioned. The thing that is really intriguing about him when I was going over and really creating a scouting report based on what I watched is, he uses his frame extremely well to box out defenders. He comes down with contested catches, whether it's in traffic or down the sideline. He does a really nice job of that, can redirect himself as a route runner. He's a good 50-50 jump ball guy, and he does a good job of recognizing, the spatial awareness, the sideline awareness. He always knows where he is on the field, which is a good thing. Gets 2 feet in bounds. He's got quick feet, which makes him a solid route runner, can stop on a dime. He's going to need refinement as a route runner. He's good. He's NFL good to get into the NFL, and I think that's the thing. When I watch Milton Wright, everything about him screams NFL good. But is he good enough to make an impact in the NFL? What are we looking at with him? He's a very good natural hands catcher, can be relied on third down, red zone, you name it. He's got great hand-eye coordination for the position, strong hands. I think just the ball skills speak for itself. When, you get him in the red zone one-on-one, you like his chances to come down with the football. Quality speed. He's not a deep guy. He's not somebody, maybe to a degree he is because of the size and the way he uses it, but he's not somebody that's going to just blow you over the top with the top end speed. He doesn't have that. He's not a burner by any stretch of the imagination, but he does have enough to separate, and I think that's the important thing. And then as a blocker, he's a willing blocker. He's not afraid to get his hands dirty in the run game, which is something that I really like. I think right now his floor is wide receiver 4. I think he comes in right away. He's wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5. That's where I feel good about him. He's good enough to make an NFL roster, depending, of course, on the roster he's on. I think most teams with the potential, he can be a starter. I think depending on where he goes, I think the potential on most teams is that, he could start someday. And if he refines his game as a route runner, I think he's good enough to be in the league and work. I think he's going to need some time to work out, but at the end of the day, I think it's really going to come down to more so the NFL coaching and the NFL placement aspect, the usage rather. When you look at a guy, he's got a long way to go. Keep in mind, he missed all of rookie mini camp. He missed the mandatory mini camp, so he's going to go right in there, right in time for training camp, some would say. But we don't know what he's going to be. And so there is definitely a gamble here because say what you will, but 5th rounders, 4th rounders, even if you spend a 4th rounder and you end up cutting this guy because you only have X amount of time before you can figure it out, you only have 53 that you can keep on a roster. Well, you might have to make a tough decision, right? And so I think that's an important thing, moving forward there. We don't know the kind of player he's going to end up being. If you're a Rams fan, does he make sense for the Rams? I'll say this right now. Sean McVay, the Rams seem very non-committal to the wide receiver group outside of, Cooper Kupp, obviously, and Van Jefferson. But does Milton Wright add anything to the Rams that currently isn't on the Rams? And, the Rams most recently spent a supplemental draft pick on Isaiah Battle years ago. Les Snead was the GM of the Rams when that happened, so they've had experience. They were burned by that to a degree because Isaiah Battle didn't really do much of anything. But, I think when you look at the wide receiver room for the Rams specifically, you got Cooper Kupp you feel good about. Van Jefferson you feel good about. Tutu Atwell, they're liking what he's doing. Ben Skoranek gives them a different look that no one else on the team gives them. Then you have Demarcus Robinson, who, is going to be the leader in the clubhouse this year as far as for a career. He has the most outside snaps of any receiver on the team, including Cooper Kupp. So that's something to keep in mind. You got Tyler Johnson. You got Lance McCutcheon. You got Puka Nacua, the 5th round pick. So do the Rams want to run the risk of maybe pushing a Puka Nacua, Lance McCutcheon, who I already think is not going to make the roster, Tyler Johnson, push one of those guys off the roster in favor of maybe the potential of Milton Wright? I don't know, but here's what I'll say. Wright has that jump ball ability that is not actively seen on this roster. Consistent jump ball ability, consistent boxing out of defenders. He reminds me of A.T. Perry, who was drafted out of Wake Forest in the 6th round by the New Orleans Saints in this past draft. Very similar. He doesn't have the long speed. He doesn't have the burner speed, things like that, but he's a better route runner than given credit for. And when you look at him, he has the ability to play out, in the run game. He's willing to, get his hands dirty, stick his face in the fan. So there are things that I do really like about Milton Wright. There are things I wish I knew more of. I wish we got to see 2022. It is an incomplete evaluation. When I look at my notes, when I watch him play, it's incomplete because of the jump he made from year 1 and year 2 to year 3. Clearly he was in, and there's no way to know for sure, but he was in position to have a massive jump in year 4, and he could very well still be that receiver. We just didn't see it on the field, which makes it almost an interesting 4th round option. Here's my prediction. He's going to get drafted in the supplemental draft. I believe that. I don't know how high it's going to be, but I think it's going to be lower than a 4th round pick. So I think 5th at the max. I think 7th at the lowest. This guy was showing enough his junior year that I think he's going to entice some teams. I do not think the Rams are going to draft him. I think the Rams could be interested. I think they're going to have an internal discussion. I know they're not feeling great about the receiver room. I wouldn't be shocked if he was a Ram, but I don't think that's where they're going to go, because I don't think right now they're in a position where, I know they just spent 14 draft picks. They acquired 14 draft picks in this past draft, but I don't think they're in a position where they can just take a risk like that on a 4th or 5th round pick for next year. Would I do it? I think I would, because he offers something that no one else on the team is giving him: consistent jump ball production. They had that last year with Allen Robinson, although it wasn't really consistent because of just the situation. But the player itself, Allen Robinson, was that guy. So can Milton Wright be that guy for an NFL team? He could, but I think it's very fair to say he's going to be fighting his way onto a roster, 4th, 5th receiver, maybe even a 6th receiver. And for the Rams, if they didn't go out and sign Demarcus Robinson, Tyler Johnson, and draft Puka Nacua, no doubt about it, I think they'd be the favorite to get Milton Wright. But they've had 3 receivers in the last 2 months. I think that's the direction that they're going to go in. They're going to let those guys battle it out. There is a chance that they could get Milton Wright. I wouldn't be shocked, but I'm going to say they don't. And I think he's going to end up with one of the lower tier teams and just try to make it. Maybe it's the Houston Texans, and you bring him in. You have Robert Woods, who you feel good about. You get Tank Dell, whatever. Something like that. That's where I think Milton Wright's going to go. Just to add some size on the outside, complement the receiver room. But does he fit the Rams? I think he does. And the thing that is very interesting going into this is that he's not your typical diva receiver. This is somebody that is a willing blocker. You got to block to be able to play on Sean McVay's offense as a pure receiver. And so there is that going for him. But what I will say is he's good enough to be drafted. I hope he is for his sake. And if he's not, it won't be the end of the world. I could definitely see this guy making a 53. But we'll see. Again, junior year, the big turnout, the big ascension. So can he build off that in 2023? We'll find out. But another interesting option before I head out, the Raiders getting reunited with his former quarterback, Aiden O'Connell, who could very well end up as the starter with the whole Jimmy Garoppolo fiasco going on with his injuries. So, there are different options here. Maybe Arizona. There's so many teams out there. I wouldn't be surprised. But that's going to do it for me. I'm Jake Ellenbogen. Be sure to like, subscribe, comment, and I will see you guys soon. We'll see what ends up happening to Milton Wright coming out of Purdue. I think he gets drafted. Let me know in the comment section what you think. Take it easy, guys. Later.